Shields up, Ironbreakers, and welcome back to Monster Hunter World Iceborne. We've been replaying Iceborne here in the channel on our live streams, and in case you haven't seen those populate on your feed, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon so that you guys are actually notified when I go live with a brand new Iceborne live stream, and you can come and hang out and watch me play some Gunlance, do some crazy shenanigans. We did Return to World earlier this month, and now we're doing, not this month, earlier this year, and now we're doing Return to Iceborne. But there's a second reason why I'm doing a Return to Iceborne, and that is because on the 20th of August, I'm going to be going over to Gamescom, and there we're going to have Monster Hunter Wilds playable, and I plan on playing as much of that as I possibly can, but I figured that ahead of that I would jump back into World and Iceborne to get my muscle memory back, because I believe that Wild is going to play much closer to World and Iceborne than necessarily Rise and Sunbreak. I'm not entirely sure if I'm correct on that assumption or not. I hope I am, because I'm getting muscle memory from World and Iceborne. But anyway, as I've been playing through Monster Hunter World Iceborne, I've realized that there's this one thing that really frustrates me. This is actually something that I already knew. As a matter of fact, when we did Return to World earlier this year, I actually played with Charge Blade because my plan was like, I'm going to play with Charge Blade. Then when we go to Iceborne, I'm going to continue playing with Charge Blade, because to me, I find that to be a much easier weapon to use in the end game of Iceborne, whereas I find the Gunlance to be a lot more frustrating because of one very specific mechanic that I'm going to be showing you guys. As a matter of fact, the other day I was on stream and I was thinking to myself, could Gunlance be the hardest weapon to use in Monster Hunter World Iceborne? And in my opinion, it actually is. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, you're just saying that because that's your favorite weapon. And it's like, wouldn't that make absolutely no sense? Because wouldn't you play weapons that you're the most comfortable with? Doesn't that make more sense? Why would I think that, for instance, the Charge Blade is much easier to use than the Gunlance? I mean, I also play a whole lot of Charge Blade, but there are other weapons that I consider to be easier to use when it comes to Monster Hunter World Iceborne. But I'm not stating this as a fact, but I am going to be presenting you guys with a couple of things and a couple of interesting scenarios that hopefully you guys will find entertaining. So let's jump into things. So naturally, as I began thinking about this, one of the things that I did was I took it to Twitter and to YouTube, but I phrased my question wrong. Because my initial question was, is Gunlance the most mechanically complex weapon in Monster Hunter World Iceborne? And if you answer no, say which weapon do you think it is. And what I realized is that this might just not be the right question, because it's not about mechanical complexity, it is about execution of the mechanics of the weapon. That is what I consider to be the hardest thing when it comes to Monster Hunter World Iceborne, is the execution of the Gunlance's mechanics, because of one specific thing. A lot of you guys already know what that thing is, but for those of you that don't, then let's build up some suspense as we go through the video. So anyways, I asked this both on Twitter as well as on YouTube, and, most people said, no, Gunlance is not the most mechanically complex weapon. And to be fair, I actually don't think it might be the most mechanically complex weapon. I haven't even thought that much about which one is the most mechanically complex weapon, but a lot of people were saying that some of the hardest weapons to play from their point of view is the Charge Blade, the Insect Glaive, the Gunlance, and the Hunting Horn. As a matter of fact, the winner of the poll in both websites was the Hunting Horn. Now, the poll here is which weapon is the hardest to play solo in Iceborne Endgame Hunt, and a lot of people replied with Hunting Horn because they were saying, well, the Hunting Horn excels in the group, which is true, but the Hunting Horn is also a powerhouse on its own, in my opinion anyway. I would actually love to hear more from Hunting Horn mains, because a lot of people told me in my comment section that, like, oh, actually, I'm a Hunting Horn main. I have no idea why so many people are voting for the Hunting Horn. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think that the Hunting Horn is the hardest weapon to play, but we'll go over this. But YouTube was pretty much the same thing. Now, one of the things that you will notice here is the Charge Blade is well ahead of the Gunlance in both of these in terms of how difficult it is to play. And on YouTube, the Insect Glaive, apparently people consider that to be the easiest, and on here as well, which I agree with, by the way. I do think that out of all of these weapons, probably the Insect Glaive is the easiest one to play. We're going to get into that. It's also interesting because when I did my first weapon guides for Monster Hunter World, Insect Glaive became one of my most watched videos of all time. I have like this popular videos tab on my channel, which if we actually go to my channel, you guys will see that the right here, this is the popular videos tab. So it's got a Dark Souls guide, We have my video where I told people not to repeat quests, they should be doing investigations. And then we have my Monster Hunter World Insect Glaive tips, which even has a terrible thumbnail and somehow still managed to accrue 620,000 views. That's pretty friggin' good. But it also means that a lot of people were struggling with Insect Glaive, and I'm happy that I was able to help that many people. But we're going to be showing you guys some Insect Glaive gameplay as well. Now, another thing, as I was, looking up some more stuff about this, I found a video by Rage Gaming, and in there he apparently did this big poll where he asked everybody what were the hardest weapons to play, but this is for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. But it's interesting because at the tippity top we still find Charge Blade, Insect Glaive, Gun Lance, and Greatsword. In my opinion, I would swap this list around significantly if we're talking Rise and Sunbreak. I do think that the Insect Glaive is much harder to play in Sunbreak, but I also think that the Great Sword is also harder to play, potentially even more than the Charge Blade. I think that the Charge Blade is not that hard, especially when you see the absolute landslide. But basically, there's a lot of people that consider the Charge Blade extremely hard to play, which is interesting to me as somebody that also plays the Charge Blade. But let's jump in here. So the weapons in question were Insect Glaive, Hunting Horn, Charge Blade, and Gun Lance. And what I'm proposing to this video is that the Gun Lance is the hardest weapon to play. So, when it comes to the Hunting Horn, the hardest thing about the Hunting Horn to me is memorizing the songs, because the execution of the Hunting Horn doesn't really have a whole lot that is dependent on external factors or anything like that. I don't play Hunting Horn all that much, so I'm very curious to hear from people that actually do play the Hunting Horn. I really want to hear from all my fellow duders out there. Let me know in the comment section of this video, do you think that the Hunting Horn, specifically in Iceborne, is one of the hardest weapons to play or not? But basically, the way that you play the way that I would play the Hunting Horn at least would be like, well, first we want to get the self-improvement, which is twice on Y, and then we can chain that into getting attack up, which is twice on circle, and we already have that as well. And then after the circle, we can follow that up with, let's say, health boost, which would be the double note and triangle. And we already have like 3 tunes here queued up, and at this point we can do the performance, which is R2. Boom. And now we just wait a little bit as he does his little play thing. And now that he played all the tunes, we play R2 again. Boom. And this is going to give you like max buffs. Now, this is a very ideal situation. We're just sitting here and, the monster's not attacking us. So I'm assuming that a more practical situation, for those of you that actually play the Hunting Horn, you're not going to be buffing like this. You're not going to be just like queuing up 3 mega buffs and then you're going to like do the thing. I would imagine that people probably go through and they will do like 1 buff and then they will perform. But again, to be honest, I don't play the Hunting Horn. I'm not pretending to understand how the Hunting Horn works. But this would be the depth of the Hunting Horn. As a matter of fact, I feel like some of the times that I've seen people play this weapon in a more competitive setting, or at least when they're trying to speedrun or something like that, one of the things that I see done a lot is actually the back circle move. So like they'll do something and then they'll do that one to cancel it out instantly and hit the monster with this, and just like keep following up with those types of notes. Naturally, in Iceborne, we also got something new in the form of the L2 attack, which I absolutely love. I think this is fantastic. The little spin to win, and then it also gives you impact waves. For a while, I was actually playing this because I love the idea of the impact waves, like bong, and then you do it again, bong. But I kind of feel that when it comes to the Hunting Horn, right? If I wanted to main the Hunting Horn, which I don't, it's not a weapon that, really strikes my fancy all that much. I'm sorry, fellow duders out there. But like, if I wanted to, I feel like I could get used to memorizing the patterns of the songs and then finding the openings that I'm looking for. And then, just hitting the monster, play the notes, do the performance whenever there's openings and stuff like that. It feels like this to me is more of a question of practice than necessarily mechanical execution. So those are my thoughts on the Hunting Horn, but you guys let me know. Out of all of these 4 weapons, I think that the Hunting Horn is probably either second or third. But for the people that we're talking about, and by the way, I don't have like proper sets for these weapons because I started a fresh save. I never really had a pretty good save on PC because most of my World and Iceborne time was spent on PlayStation. But anyway, for those of you that were saying like, nah, the insect glaive is the hardest one by far. So we have this set of barrels here that kind of like simulates a monster. If you see that little yellow drawing up there, wait, let me draw the weapon. Where we're aiming our crosshairs right now, that would be considered the monster's head. These things would be considered like the monster's wings, and these would be considered the monster's legs. Now, depending on the monster, sometimes the place where you shoot your kinsect at is going to change the buff that you get. Certain monsters get it differently, but the way that I usually do it is I just throw the kinsect all over the place until it's like, okay, that's where I get white, that's where I get yellow, that's where I get red. But usually you get red on the head, so you just like throw out your kinsect, boop, that's your red buff right there, then you call it back, boom, that's red buff. Usually the legs, those will give you your white buff, boom, that's your white buff. You don't even need the defense buff if you really don't want to. You can just start attacking at this point because you're already going to get the improvements. But, you know, me personally, I'm a 3 buff guy, so I always go get the 3rd buff. So we hit over there, boom, 3 buffs. So a lot of people say that like, oh, managing the buffs on the insect glaive is absolutely insane. And I was like, what? Really? Doing this? And by the way, we have a slow kinsect, I know, but obviously if you're doing this in practicality and you're building sets for it, you'll have a faster kinsect. Like, you've seen me do this on PlayStation on previous videos. I play the insect glaive. As a matter of fact, the insect glaive is usually the weapon that I pick up when I was like, oh, I don't feel like dealing too much with this monster. I'm just going to pick up the insect glaive, beat the crap out of it, not even have to worry about it. That's usually my opinion when it comes to the insect glaive. That's the way that I play it, right? So it's like, I don't think it's particularly hard. It's like, okay, I get red over here. I get, you know, I get orange over here, I get white over here, boom, I have the 3 buffs. Then you can shoot out your kinsect if you want to. This one doesn't have that much stamina, but he'll be there, you know, doing his little puffs. This one's a healing kinsect. So he'll be in there attacking that specific spot, and, you know, you obviously want him to attack the spot that you're going to be hitting. So we're going to be hitting the head, we're going to do the pole vault, jump in here, grab that last hit, do a little bit of this. Even though aerial glaive is not really that powerful, with the exception of, like, if you're going in to do your little, yeah, you know, the drill thing, that's pretty powerful. But, you know, you can go in here, blow up the dust, and do all of that stuff, or you can come on down with a triangle attack, and you can play ground glaive if that's what you want. 2 triangles, 2 circles is usually the best, because that final hit there, I think, is like the hardest hitting attack on the insect glaive, if I remember correctly. Again, I haven't played it in a while. But, you know, I don't find this weapon to be particularly challenging or super complex or even hard to play. As a matter of fact, quite the opposite. I remember when a lot of people were struggling with Arch-Tempered Nergigante because he has that, like, crazy attack that he does. The insect glaive doesn't solve that, but it solves most of his other attacks. I just be like, Nergigante be doing his stuff, and I was like, yep, yeah, what's up, bro? Yeah, I'm good. I'll be up here. Don't you worry about that. And back then, we didn't even have, like, this, right? Because, wait, did we have it? No, Arch-Tempered Nergigante? I don't think we had Iceborne when that came out, right? That was Base World, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it's like, I find it very weird that people are saying that this is like a super complex weapon when I never thought that way. And I know a lot of people, well, not a lot of people that play Insect Glaive. I know somebody who plays Insect Glaive a whole lot, let's put it like that. And, you know, I just don't agree with that. But, you know, obviously this depends on every person, and like I said at the beginning of this video, I'm not saying these things as facts. These are just my opinions and my experience playing the weapon. So now let's get to the one that everybody says is like the hardest one to play by far. You need to be a mathematician. By the way, let me turn this thing off. I just had it on because the button guides, I had it on because I wanted to see the different melodies for the hunting horn. But, you know, a lot of people keep saying, no, the charge blade, that's the one, that's the hard, it's not even close. And to me, it's like, again, if you're talking about the execution of playing on a hunt with this weapon, I know that a lot of people are like, well, if you just spam SAED, sure, that's easy, but that's not the point. I'm not talking about playing like that. I'm talking about playing this weapon in any way. I mean, for starters, this is a weapon that is super versatile. So you can play it as a sword and shield really, really fast, but on top of it, this weapon actually has better mobility than sword and shield. At least in my personal opinion. Because, like, look at this. Look at what you can do. What is this? You're just like, oh, attack the monster. No, I'm going to go over here. Like, whoa, wait a minute. What's this? And not to mention that, for those of you that aren't aware, anytime that the shield is in front of you, so like at the end of this animation, that's a guard point right there. So not only you're creating distance, in the eventuality that the monster actually attacks you, you're blocking. So it's like when people tell me that this is the hardest weapon to play, I'm like, bro, just the ridiculous amount of mobility that you get with this weapon, of damage that you get with this weapon, just the sheer potential when you start using all of the things. But I guess that what confuses people is the mechanical execution of the move. So right now we have 5 files that we charged using the, using the charge slash. And now we have 5 files and they're on red. This is the ideal situation for me. I love being like this because at this point, you can basically start mashing triangle and circle or whatever attack buttons you have on your controller, Y and B. And as you are about to go into that, you press R2 and boom, your shield is charged. And then you do this thing, you just reload this with your R2 and your B or your circle, and then you hold on Y to charge your sword. Boom, and that's done. Now you can say that it's hard to learn, but hard to use? No, dude, I completely disagree with that. And now people are like, well, yeah, but now you have the spinny thing. Yeah, the only thing that changes is like if you want to charge your little spinny thing, let's go ahead and put this into red. If you want to charge your spinny thing, now you go and you do this. And you cancel with the L2. And now you got the spinny thing. This is the hard weapon, and then you can go into your super amped elemental discharge if that's what you want to do. And then there's also the super amped elemental discharge cancel, which is also extremely useful, particularly for KOs, because especially if you're using power files, obviously if you're using elemental files, that's a different topic altogether. But it's like, this is something that I personally don't find that hard. Like, look, we're going to cancel this out. Boom. And now it does 3 file explosions. But I can understand that, like, people that maybe never played Charge Blade, they find it hard. They find it hard to play because they don't understand all of the different mechanics that are at play with this weapon at any given time. Like, for instance, maybe you don't know that at this point, you have Natural Mind's Eye. You just get Natural Mind's Eye as a part of the base kit of your weapon. That is insane. I don't understand. Not to mention, not only you get Natural Mind's Eye, you get file explosions on fast attacks. Like, what? And you get to do all these crazy KO things. Like, I don't find it hard to play at all. And people are like, oh, but the guard points. I think a lot of people over-exaggerate the complexity of guard points. Like, yeah, it takes a little bit for you to get used to when the guard points are, how to do counters with the guard points. Like, for instance, whenever you swap from sword and shield mode to axe mode, that's a guard point. Whenever you do the opposite, that's a guard point too, at the end of that animation. So this is just one of those situations to me where a lot of people vote for Charge Blade, but if they actually played the weapon and if they enjoyed playing the weapon, they would realize that this is not a weapon that is that difficult to execute from a mechanical standpoint. And I'm going to say something that a lot of people are going to be like, wait, what? To me, it's harder to do a 4-side slash on a longsword than it is to play the entirety of the kit of the Charge Blade, and it's not even close because my timing is terrible for that. But not just that, I don't find the 4-side slash a super intuitive mechanic like the actual timing for doing it. Whereas, for instance, the timing for doing a guard point, it's like you're blocking, so even if you fail the guard point, you're still blocking. But if you want to land the guard point, it's like, okay, the hit's about to come, it's going to hit now, boop, guard point. And then you counter into a SAD. So it's like, again, it's one of those things that I would consider to be potentially hard to learn, but not really hard to use. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you right now, I find this weapon potentially, for me, one of the easiest weapons to play, both in Monster Hunter World as well as Monster Hunter World Iceborne. And On my first playthrough of Monster Hunter World, I went back and I saw, like, I don't have the image with me here, but I saw which weapons I had played the most, and Charge Blade was actually my most played weapon, despite the fact that Gun Lance is actually my main weapon. So now let's talk about the Gun Lance itself and why I think that, in my opinion, this is the hardest weapon to play in Monster Hunter World Iceborne specifically. I'm not talking about Rise, Sunbreak, or even Base World. I'm talking specifically in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. And the reasoning why is because of Wyvern Stake Blast. And a lot of people give me flack over Wyvern Stake Blast, but like, look, I will not be convinced that this is not one of the most gimmicky things. Like, I was actually talking about it today on stream, and I was like, you know what? If they were to scale shelling appropriately, like the same shell scaling that we have in World and Iceborne, I'd rather have the heat gauge to manage than the Wyvern Stake Blast. And Gun Lance mains will know exactly what I'm talking about. And they will probably be like, whoa, Rurikhan, you're crazy. It's like, no. Because the problem with managing heat gauge in GU is that shelling damage sucked because they didn't scale it appropriately for G rank. But with the scaling of shelling that we have in this game, I'd rather do heat gauge than do what I'm about to show you. So, first things first. In order to do Wyvern Stake Blast, you need ammunition. Now, on the training room, we're lucky because we have bomb pods, because the quality of the ammunition that you load into your gun lance is also very important. So, for instance, do we have stones in here? I think they're stones, right? This is stones? Yeah, these are stones. So I want you to pay attention to something. I'm going to charge up the Wyvern Stake Blast, which is a very lengthy animation. I want you to look at the size of the stake right now that is below our ammunition, right? That little glowing orange stake that you see in there. You see how it has like a length that goes all the way up to the third shell of the gun lance, right? You can see that, again, top right-hand corner light immediately here where I'm pointing at, okay? See how big that is? That right there is a good worm stake. But if you get garbage ammo to put on it, so like for instance, if I was to, instead of putting those bomb pods, which are very good, probably the best ammunition in the game, if I was to put stones on it, now it's smaller. And because it's smaller, it means that it doesn't stay attached to the monster as long as the other type of ammunition. So not only you are dependent on using ammunition in order to load this thing into your gun lance, but also you can't just use any old ammunition you find if you want to be effective with it. You need to actually use good ammunition that you take away from the monsters. And I don't know if it's still the case because I haven't really used dragon ammunition all that much to load the Wyvern Stake, but back when the game came out, I don't know if dragon pods were glitched or what the deal was, but dragon pods counted the same as stones. It sucked. So I was like, wait, I'm fighting this big elder dragon that drops dragon pods and I can't use them? How am I supposed to make this work? But anyway, so as you can see, this mechanic of Wyvern Stake Blast, you have to do all of these crazy things just to set it up, right? So we're going to get our bomb pods. And now I want you to pay attention to the length of the animation, right? Now, luckily, while you're doing this, you're also blocking, so it's not the end of the world. But then you have to do, there are a couple of different moves. All of the moves of the gun lance that do the worm stake will now deploy the Wyvern Stake Blast. So if I shell twice, there. But the other really bad part about Wyvern Stake Blast is that it doesn't place the Wyvern Stake Blast within the first touch. So what does that mean? It means that, like, I want you to pay attention how long it takes until the Wyvern Stake Blast, because we're going to do this poke thing. And at the end of the poke, when we're about to bring the gun lance back, that's when it deploys the worm stake. What does this mean? If you hit a monster with that poke that's about to deploy the worm stake, and the monster jumps back, the worm stake doesn't friggin' stay there! Not to mention, a lot of times, monsters move erratically, right? So you're like, okay, I'm gonna aim it right at the head of the monster. And you're gonna like, here it goes. And then the monster moves, and it ends up in his ass! And you guys are like, Rurikhan, why is this worm stake thing so important? Because, you know, if you're playing traditional gunlance, if you want to actually use shelling, they actually nerfed shelling damage, and then they added the rest of the damage to that thing. So basically, in order for me to do proper shelling damage, I need to deploy that on the monster. If I don't, I'm dealing nerf damage. Because you see, there's follow-up explosions. That's the actual shelling damage that I should be doing with this gunlance. The combined total of the shelling of the gunlance plus the shelling explosions that you get from the wyvern stake. That is usually the way that gunlance is scaled to work. And having to place this thing down, and then imagine it's like, okay, I placed it down in there, but for whatever reason, the monster's not giving you openings on that side. So now you have to shell over here, and your damage is garbage. And if you want to like, okay, but I need to attack here now, okay, you're just not dealing as much damage. It's just that simple. There's nothing you can do. Or you can say, well, you can reapply the worm stake. Yeah, sure, let me just go over here, pick up some random ammo that, of course, there's going to be loads while I'm fighting a monster that's going to be a hard monster. And then I go in, okay, wait, I fumbled it. Come on. Ah, there it is. Okay, now we have it placed again. It's like, no, I'm sorry. This is absolutely ridiculous. And this, in my opinion, is why the gunlance is the hardest weapon to play. Because the placing of this thing is one of the most gimmicky, weird-ass things. And a lot of people tell me like, oh, Rurikhan, I have to tenderize. Guess what? I have to do this, and then I have to tenderize, and I have to tenderize twice! Because we don't even get single tenderizing with the gunlance, right? So it's like, if I want to tenderize, I have to do all of this nonsense, and while the time is ticking down, I still have to go and I still have to tenderize if I want to get optimal melee damage. I don't know. You guys tell me, is this the hardest weapon to play or not? But either way, I just figured that this would be an interesting video to make because, you know, a lot of times I talk about the wormstake blast and why it's so frustrating. And I feel like a lot of people don't actually understand how the mechanic works. Like, you see me play with it and whatnot, but it's so hectic when you're actually on the hunt that understanding the mechanic itself might, you know, hopefully help some people understand why this is such a frustrating mechanic for the gunlance. But anyway, thank you all very much for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.